Welcome to Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories. Novelists Mary Kay Andrews, Kristin Harmel, Kristy Woodson Harvey, and Patti Callahan Henry are 4 longtime friends with more than 70 published books between them. Together, they host Friends and Fiction, with author interviews and fascinating insider talk about publishing and writing, to highlight and support independent bookstores. They discuss the books they've written, the books they're reading now, and the art of storytelling. If you love books and you're curious about the writing world, you're in the right place.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show. I am Patti Callahan Henry.
And I'm Kristy Woodson Harvey.
And this is Friends and Fiction. 4 New York Times bestselling authors, endless stories, almost 5 years of them now, to support independent bookstores, authors, readers, librarians, and people like you.
If you're not with us already, we hope you'll join our Facebook group, which is more than 260,000 members strong. That's more than a quarter million avid readers. We'd also like to invite you to follow us on Instagram and YouTube and to subscribe to our Substack newsletter, which is full of awesome bonus content. You can find out more about our community and all we have to offer, and we offer a lot, at friendsandfiction.com.
With so many exciting things going on with our community, I want to remind you about our live and in-person events. You know, when we first started this 5 years ago, we could only do this.
Yeah.
Zoom and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But now we are live and in person at events, and we had a total blast.
So much fun.
It was so much fun.
Celebrating our Patti's beautiful new book.
Celebrating the story she left behind. But you don't want to miss out. So be sure to mark your calendars, because we have 2 more of these live in-person events coming up this summer. On Friday, May 30th, we will all be together in Myrtle Beach to celebrate Kristy's launch of Beach House Rules, which just got a starred book list review. By the by. And then on Tuesday, June 17th, we will all be together again on the Jersey Shore. So we're all going to pack up our bags and leave the South and head north, celebrate Kristin's The Stolen Life of Colette Marceau for an event hosted by Booktown at the Algonquin Theater in Manasquan. So stay tuned for details on both of those upcoming events. Did I mention, Kristy, yours is at Litchfield? Did I leave that part out? So Kristy's is at Litchfield Books in Pawleys Island, and we will be telling you loads more about it. So stay tuned, because you're going to want to jump on those tickets. Now, on this episode, we are thrilled to welcome Emilia Hart to discuss her new novel, The Sirens, which is set to release on April 1st. So let me give you a little bit of background on Amelia. She is a British-Australian writer. She was born in Sydney, that's Australia, and studied English literature and law at the University of New South Wales before working as a lawyer in Sydney and London, my favorite town in the world. We were Barnes & Noble Book Club Pick Sisters, and that's where I discovered her work with her 2023 novel, Wayward.
Amelia's short fiction has been published in Australia and the UK. Her debut novel, Wayward, was an instant New York Times bestseller and the winner of 2 Goodreads Choice Awards, Best Debut Novel and Best Historical Fiction.
Amelia is a graduate of the Curtis Brown Creatives online writing course and was highly commended in the 2021 Chalcedonian Novel Award. She lives, enviously, in London.
Her new book, The Sirens, is a spellbinding novel about sisters separated by centuries, but bound together by the sea. Can you say that 3 times fast?
No, that's why I gave you that line. So instead of talking about Amelia, let's bring her on. Sean, can you bring Amelia on?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Welcome from London. We're so thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely and very generous introduction.
Yeah, that's why we keep you off screen, so you don't blush. All right. Welcome to the Friends and Fiction Show, my friend. We are so ready to dive into The Sirens. pun intended, as this is a water-drenched novel. All right, Amelia, this is about two sets of sisters across time.
Yes.
1788 from Ireland and modern-day Australia. It is, and I mean this, a breathtaking tale of female resilience and the bonds of sisterhood across both time and land. So the Sirens captures the power of dreams. It captures mystery and the magic of the sea. In 1788, Mary and Eliza are on a convict ship across the sea, leaving their beloved Ireland. Well, in modern day, Jess and Lucy are, this is a good word, embroiled in family secrets that are tearing them apart, as well as recurring nightmares that tie them back to Mary and Eliza. So, Amelia, if this is what the novel is about, what would you add? And then our favorite question at Friends in Fiction, what would you say the novel is really about?
Wow, thank you so much. And I love the way that you summarized it. I think I'm going to have to use all of those lines when I talk about
I'll
it.
send it to you.
That was so brilliant. Thank you. What else is it about? What's it really about? I think for me, the core thing it's about is sisterhood. And I mean that in the kind of literal sense of sisters, but also in the broad sense of connections between women, across time. And I think with this novel, because that's something I also explored with Wayward, and it's something that I am so interested in. But with this novel, I wanted to kind of really focus on like an Australian story, if that makes sense, like an Australian version of sisterhood. And yeah, it just meant so much to me to kind of write about my home country, and also to write in a way that's informed by my experience of being a sister.
How many do you have? How many sisters?
Just one.
Just one.
But yeah, she is the best. She's based. I mean, I have two brothers as well, and they're amazing too. Okay. But yeah, my sister is just a really fantastic person, and has kind of been a huge support for me and an inspiration, really. So I
encourage everyone to read the author note about your sister and the bond between you two. It almost makes me want to cry talking about it. So I encourage everyone, after you're done reading the book, to read Amelia's ode to her sister.
Well, you guys just really teed me up here, because my next question is, I want to meet these sisters. So the first set of sisters is in modern day Australia. Lucy is a student who wakes up in the middle of a sleepwalking episode and is stunned by her actions. She is having harrowing dreams and is obsessed with true crime. Which, like, who isn't really?
Who isn't?
Yeah, I mean, meanwhile, it's like very of the moment. Okay, so meanwhile, her sister Jess is living in a remote house on Comer Bay as an artist. So tell us about these sisters and how they came to you through this novel.
Well, I think the thing that's interesting about Jess and Lucy compared to Mary and Eliza is that at the start of the novel, unlike Mary and Eliza, who are kind of really contained in these close quarters and confined, Jess and Lucy are like a very, they're physically so far apart and also emotionally so far apart. So the novel, a lot of it is about them kind of coming together and sort of understanding each other better and understanding their place, like in their family and in their history. But then I think I was just thinking about you talking about, Kristy, when you mentioned that Lucy is obsessed with true crime and then Jess is an artist. And I think what's really interesting is I've sort of unwittingly injected both of them with like different parts of my personality, because I'm really obsessed. I'm obsessed with true crime. Like it's, my like main guilty pleasure. I really love the podcast Crime Junkie. I've been listening to it for like ever since it began. And I also love like drawing and painting, although I don't do as much of it now as I should. So I think, yeah, it's funny how I've kind of split off different parts of myself to create these sisters.
I love that. I think we always do that. I think even the characters that seem so different from us, like when we really dig down deep, there's like this little piece of us, even in our even the characters we don't like, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, well, because we like our experience of being a human is defined by our experience. So when we're writing characters, like that obviously has to come through.
Yeah.
I always say we only have our own compost pile to work with.
So,
and I could tell that it wasn't a fleeting interest in cold cases. The way you described what it means to the character, I was like, oh, She knows, like she's into it. It's really fascinating to read you writing about that. All right, so the next set of sisters we meet in 1788. There was a fleet of 11. This is a true story, that a fleet of 11 ships landed on the shores 10,000 miles from England. And those ships carried convicts that came from Britain, but also from Ireland. And this is where we meet the sisters, Mary and Eliza. And like you said, completely opposite of being separated. They are in the hull of a ship. It's claustrophobic. And they have been torn from Ireland to their home after an accident that injured a landowner. And recently I did some family research, and my family is from Callahan's, from Armagh, which is where you set some of this. And I gasped when I read that. I was like, oh my gosh. I knew about the convict ships, but not in this way. You rendered it with such vivid description that I felt seasick, which, by the way, isn't hard for me to do. But how did you hear about this piece of history, and what made you want to include it?
I mean, the convict story is such an important part of Australian history that it's something that every school child will learn about, because, you know, it's like our founding myth, I suppose, this idea that, you know, these, petty criminals were shipped from the British Isles to Australia. And, you know, it was the process of colonization. And so it's something that is very much like in the national consciousness. And I think the way Australians think about it is really interesting, because a lot of people feel really proud, for instance, to have had convict ancestors, because we have this phrase called the Aussie battler, as in someone who kind of struggles to make a living on, like, you know, in his hospitable land, and like fights against the odds. And I think the idea that modern day Australia began as this penal colony has led to this perception that there was more social mobility, because, you know, when everyone has been a criminal, like, you don't have a class system in the same way that we have it in the UK, infamously, for example. But I sort of felt that, you know, obviously that ignores like a huge part of the story, which is the experience of Indigenous Australians, which was not something that I felt was my place to kind of write about, to explore in fiction. But I also felt that it didn't really kind of address what that experience would have been like for a woman. Just, I think, you know, especially because obviously, you know, we still kind of live in a sort of patriarchal society now, but that was so much more pronounced back then. And I think women could definitely be disadvantaged by these systems, and often like their stories are not really like what we remember and what's written down and what we sort of talk about and celebrate. So, but I also I wasn't doing family research, but I did when I was writing this book. But I did find out that one of my ancestors was the captain of a convict ship.
Whoa!
So he was transporting Irish men and women on a ship called the Atlas in 1801, and he wasn't a very good captain. He was quite negligent. He sort of was really keen to make extra profit during the voyage, and so he carried like extra casks of rum to sell along the way at the different ports they stopped at. But that meant there wasn't enough space for the convicts, so their living conditions were like even more cramped, which meant that disease spread more easily. And so between 60 and 70 of these convicts died, which, you know, even then was thought of as like not good. And that really kind of haunted me. And I think what I found strange was that like other of my ancestors, particularly on my mum's side, were like Irish women who had emigrated to Australia during the famine. So they weren't convicts, but they were kind of making this journey only decades later. And I just thought that it could so easily have been one of my family members on that ship as a convict. And that was kind of what made me want to explore what that experience would have been like.
It is when they're selling the rum, or at least trying to sell it. It's the kind of historical fact that not only made the story better for Eliza and Mary, meaning our understanding of them. But I could tell it was one of those little nuggets that we pull out in historical fiction that kind of flips the story around and helps us understand, these captains weren't doing this out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, you tell us that Comer Bay in the novel is a fictional place, but is inspired by your treasured memories of staying with family in Bateman's Bay on the south coast of New South Wales. So did you ever consider just writing about the actual place, or did you always want to fictionalize it? And why did you decide to do that, if so?
Oh, it's interesting because I haven't really kind of examined my motivations for making it fictional, but I think yeah, it's interesting. I think because
we're doing that for you. We're making you examine.
Yeah. So we're just putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think because the Naiad, the convict ship in the novel, is fictional, it kind of just made sense to me to have a fictional place. And just because, obviously this is, it's historical fiction, so it's inspired by history, but I'm putting my own spin on it and I'm creating characters, who aren't real people. And I think for that reason, it just felt right to have like a fictional place and also because, as far as I know, there is no strange history of like missing men in Bateman's Bay. Like that's entirely invented.
Right.
I wouldn't want people to think that there's this like, strange thing happening in Bateman's Bay that isn't really happening.
Yeah,
exactly.
That makes sense. That's very smart. Yes. I like that. So have you returned there?
I haven't been there since the book was published. Okay. I mean, because, it's only just come out. Come out in the US. But I mean, I think the last time I went back there was maybe like 5 years ago. But I do have a trip to Australia coming up. No, hang on. It wasn't 5. Yeah, it was 5 years ago or 4 years ago.
Wow.
The pandemic. Yeah. But I have a trip coming up to Australia in May. So hopefully I'll get to go then and visit my aunt and uncle.
Nice.
Okay, so this house on the cliff, yes. I have to know if it exists because I feel like you could show us a photo and we would be like, oh yeah, that's the house.
I'm so sorry. It is not real.
This is like when I found out the house from the holiday wasn't real.
Yeah.
Just crushing.
That's what it feels like, Kristy.
You did such a great job describing it. So that is the important thing, is we got to go there in our mind.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's kind of inspired by, like my grandfather lived on the South Coast as well. So like, I guess I kind of put his house, which was beautiful, and made it like smaller and dilapidated, then put it on a cliff.
Okay. Yeah. Great. It's very romantic. I love that.
Well, it feels like it was made from a real house, so that makes sense that your grandfather's house inspired it. I really.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm telling you, you could show me a picture. I'd be like, yes, that's where Jess is. All right. So inside this novel, there are what I'm going to call, you can tell me if you don't like this term, nesting stories. It's like stories inside stories. Yeah. There's the cold case mystery. Mm-hmm. There's a podcast. Mm-hmm. There's a found journal. Mm-hmm. There's mysterious dreams. There's mystical art. And all of these weave together so beautifully. Thank you. I think what I'm asking you about is your writing process. Did you outline this? Did you know that all of these would weave and nest inside each other before you even started? Or are you like me and Kristy and you're just a seat of your pantser?
Yeah, I guess there's an element of planning in the sense that if I know I have like an idea that I think is good, then I kind of know where I want things to end, if that makes sense. But I don't know how to get there. But this was pretty seat of the pants. I think the thing that came to me was the idea of there being like this town with like this strange history and the abandoned baby and the shipwreck. Because I had a really difficult time writing this book. Because I wrote like 3 previous versions that were all extremely like completely different, except that they also had convicts. But other than that, they were completely different.
Wow. I'm so happy to hear we're not alone.
Oh, it was just, it was very difficult.
Yeah.
So I guess that answers my question. How much did this story change from the first time you sat down to
Sorry,
write it?
yes.
Dramatically.
So much. Yeah. I mean, it's actually quite funny now, like now that it's over and I'm out the other side, I can appreciate that it was like an experience that shaped me as a writer and probably as a person, because I think I had to be resilient to sort of keep redoing it. But yeah, originally it was like a much darker novel. It didn't have any magic realism. And so it was just straight historical fiction. There was no contemporary element, no kind of like murder mystery element. And it was all kind of set in colonial Australia, apart from the part on the convict ship. So it just was much like heavier and quite different to Wayward in that way, which I think was one of the problems. And then
it's hard to move.
Yeah. And I then, in trying to kind of like improve it, I did have a version. This is a funny story, but I had a version that involved a modern day woman sailing around the world. So I was like, I can have like dual timelines with like dual boat journeys.
Yeah.
But the problem was that I didn't know anything about sailing. So I actually
that would be a problem.
Yeah. So I learned to sail.
Oh my goodness.
No.
Amelia. And then you didn't even use it.
Yep. And I did like some start yachting courses with my friends, and, I did a few of those. And in the meantime, that version of the book was scrapped. I was like, this isn't working. But now I have my competent crew qualification. So I'm like,
okay.
So cool.
Kristy will attest, the novel that I just had come out, I scrapped the first version, a year of writing. And I called Kristy one afternoon and said, I'm scrapping it. And she said, you cannot. I feel sick to my stomach. You cannot do
I remember, like, it was one of those moments, like, where, like, I can tell you where I was. Like, I was driving in the car and I could tell you exactly where I was, because I was like,
oh my goodness.
No. And she was like, no, I'm scrapping. I'm starting over. And I was like, oh God, like, I just felt like physically ill for her, because she'd worked.
So Amelia, I call that before I decided how to fix it, or, take what mattered out, which it sounds like you did. We took what mattered and wrote something else, like take the nugget that mattered. I call that the month of despair.
Oh my gosh, I can completely, I know how that would have felt, and it's awful, but sometimes it's the right choice. But it's hard if you feel, because do you read each other's work?
No, we don't.
No.
Not until it's done. No.
Yeah. I guess, but obviously, Kristy, you must have felt that it sounded amazing. So
we know very deeply, like, we talk.
No, she knew what it was about.
So we'll talk a lot about, like, I'm working through this part, or I can't decide if I'm going to go this way or that way. Like, I was like very involved. Like, I very much knew what the story was about. And I was like, no, like, this is a great idea. You can't let this go. But it turned out, I obviously didn't read the first version, but I loved the second version so much that I can't imagine it being anything else. So I do think, you end up where you're supposed to be, but it's a very difficult decision.
But I think it's brave. Like, I feel like I'm complimenting myself, and I don't mean to do, but I think, it can be the brave decision sometimes to step back.
100%, Amelia. It is.
Yes. Well, and it's, it's no fun for anyone to put something out when you don't feel like it was 100% the best work that it could have been. And I think that's, it's better to like suffer through on this end than to spend the rest of your life thinking, that could have been a better book.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be the worst outcome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so I had an interview recently, Amelia, and I said exactly the same thing. I said, I feel as if even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have known to stop.
Yeah.
Like I would have just kept pushing through instead of saying, this is not working.
Yeah.
Like you said, we're going to keep the convicts, but we have to have a different kind of story. So I'm glad that you did.
Yeah. I don't want to give myself too much credit, because my agent was really helpful and definitely held my hand through a lot of the rewriting.
It's hard, man.
So hard. It's so
It's
hard.
really
The rewriting's the hard part to me. Like the
Yeah.
writing is joyful and the rewriting is very difficult. But
Yeah.
we loved Wayward, and here with the Sirens, which now this means even more. Now that I'm asking you this, I feel like we even have a deeper insight. You've added even more magical realism, which evidently wasn't originally there. So, there's so many new terms being batted about. We've got romantasy and dark fantasy. And so how would you define magical realism? Or would you even qualify your books as magical realism?
That's such a great question. I think, when I was first writing Wayward, and I was a reader, but I was totally isolated from the world of publishing. And so I didn't know about all these different kind of like subgenres, if that makes sense. I always thought of it as like history with like a twist or a sprinkling of magic.
Yeah.
But I suppose, but I would say magic realism or history with a speculative or magic element. But I think the way that I would sort of define magic realism is something that is like recognizably our world, but has like an element of like the uncanny or the otherworldly in some way, but in a way that maybe says something about our world, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I love this description. I love it.
I think that's a great way to put it. That's amazing.
I love that. We talk about it a lot. Like, what's the difference between saying there's magic in my novel, like Harry Potter with a wand, and magical realism, which is this feeling to me that can happen.
Yeah.
Right. That can happen. That is, I'm with you in this magic.
Yeah.
Well, and I love you saying that, before you were kind of in it, you didn't really know. I mean, I remember, going out on submission for the first time and being like, I don't even really know. I don't know what genre my book is. Like, I think it's something that we take for granted once we've been in it for a while. But like, you don't really, I remember I would read things and it would be like, upmarket women's fiction. I'd be like, what does that mean? Like,
what does that even mean?
Going on writing? I'm not sure. What's upmarket? Is something down market? Like, I don't know.
What, wear cuter clothes with it? Like, what is it?
You think of like Uptown Girl by Billy Joel, like this.
Oh my gosh! I can sing every word to that song.
Yeah.
Maybe
That's hilarious. Living in an uptown world. Yeah. All right. I want to talk about this. There is much about dream sequences and their importance in this novel. There is a line where you write, "The surrealists believe that our dreams could help us find our true creative selves." I want you to talk to us about that and how the sisters' dreams on 1788 and present day and with each other, how they pull them together. It was a really inventive and beautiful way and part of the magical realism, right? To show the past.
Thank you. I think there are sort of two things that come to mind. So I think what I wanted to do was create this sense of there being like almost like a kind of collective female memory, if that makes sense, that different women in different time periods or places can kind of share in. So, I think there are kind of echoes through the past and into the present day of like the kind of experiences that women continue to have. So I think it was partly that. And then also, I think, and this is something I've only realized after writing it, I think it was also influenced by my own experience with dreams. And I'm not someone who like remembers her dreams very often. But when I was a child, I had this recurring dream where I was underwater and I could see like the water surface above me. I could see like the kind of sunlight sparkling on the surface, but I couldn't move. I couldn't get there. And
I have chill bumps.
Yeah.
Oof.
Well, when I asked my parents, or I said to my parents, I'm having this like recurring dream, it's scary or it's weird or whatever. They said, oh, that's probably because when you were 2, you almost drowned in the swimming pool.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I don't remember. I mean, I don't have like a conscious memory of that, but I think the dream was that memory.
Whoa, obviously.
Wow.
So,
okay, I had a recurring dream. I hadn't thought about this in years. I had a recurring dream when I was a child about falling into a water tower, which is so bizarre because even as an adult, like I've never like seen what's up there, you know?
Yeah.
I guess maybe drowning is like I don't know.
Well, my recurring dream when I was a little girl, we're having a psychoanalysis session, which is my favorite episode, was a tidal wave.
Interesting.
Really? All three of us, it's about water.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Well, I kind of wonder if like there's something really primal about water, just because like obviously as babies in the womb, we're like in water. So maybe that's why it crops up in our dreams.
Especially as children. Yeah.
Maybe so. I mean, that does make sense. We are water beings in the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I've done a lot of research into dreams. I even took this like weekend dream workshop. And I will tell you, I'm fascinated by them, Amelia. I love that it was part of the book. But water represents emotions, or so they say.
Interesting.
So that's really interesting.
Very interesting.
The other fascinating part in here is sleepwalking, which my son did. My middle son. He never left the house, but it could be really terrifying where I might find him, especially when he wasn't in bed in the morning.
Yeah.
So did you do a lot of research into this phenomenon?
I mean, like a little bit. It's kind of a lot of anecdotal stuff from like the people that I know in my life who sleepwalk. And I did sleepwalk once as a child, and I kind of remember like that experience of, you know, waking up and being really confused and disoriented. But my little brother had night terrors, which is kind of akin to sleepwalking, but like really extreme. So he would like walk around and be very distressed. And that, you know, that kind of really seared itself into my memory. But then I've also got a friend who sleepwalks all the time, like especially when she's stressed. And we did a sailing trip together a couple of years ago, and she actually tried to sleepwalk like out of the boat. Like she opened the hatch, and our other friend who was sharing a cabin with her was able to like pull her down and be like, "What are you doing?" But she thought that we were supposed to be sailing the boat, so she was like getting ready to like haul some ropes.
Oh my gosh!
No, I think it's like terrifying. Like one of my best friend's husbands, who's also a really good friend of mine, does really bizarre things when he sleepwalks. Like she'll wake up and he will have taken like all the toilet paper from everywhere in the house and like built a wall with it. Like he does these like bizarre, but you know, you're not, I would be so freaked out. Like it, cause you know, it's the middle of the night and they're like not themselves. It's a very,
well, I think the reason it really scares me, and I think that's why it felt, because it's like one of the most frightening things I can imagine, which is why I wanted to put it in the book. It's like the loss of control. You know, like that you are doing things without knowing, without having any kind of conscious knowledge or control over them. And I think because I was playing with the ideas of like the subconscious and like sort of subconscious memory and that stuff, that's why it appealed to me. But it was also something that really frightened me, because I just thought, you would feel as if you'd been taken over by someone else who's like directing your body when you're asleep. I don't know.
Well, it's like Patti, Leon Moriarty's new book, where the husband is afraid he's going to, I mean, it's a very small piece of the book, but he's afraid he's going to murder his wife in her sleep.
Yes. I love that book.
Yeah. Because like, it's like a tiny point. It's not like, but I get that, because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah. And to think it's still you who's doing it.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Like it's still you, but it's not you. Yes. It was fascinating. Yeah.
My son would sleepwalk just every now and then when he was like very small, and it would just freak me out. I mean, I was so freaked out. Like if my husband wasn't home and I was just the two of us, I would be so weirded out, because you can't wake them up. But you're just, I don't know why. I can't explain it. But like once you've experienced it, you know, it's like very freaky.
It's like, really eerie.
Yeah. Anyway, well, there is this line in the novel where Lucy says, most people want an easy life. It's unsettling when someone starts pulling apart the story we've stitched together and the things we tell ourselves for comfort, which is so true. And this is what's happening to everyone in the novel. So do themes like this come to you as you write, or do you head into the story being like, this is something I want to explore?
I think I did want to explore the ways in which we are uncomfortable talking about like gender relations, because I think, you know, the like that line comes at a point where Lucy is like dealing with something that's happened at university, and there's a sense that she's, to use an appropriate phrase, you know, people are afraid to like rock the boat, and she's been taught not to do that, and to kind of just not make a scene. And I think that's something that women, like, it's really like we're sort of socially conditioned like to be nice and not to make a scene, and to kind of, you know, like make things easier for people around us. And I think that was something I really wanted to play with. And like, what are the consequences then when you step away from that, when you make things difficult and you make a fuss? And it's uncomfortable. Sometimes you need to do that, you know, in like lots of different areas of your life, you need to make a fuss. But I think it's something I find really hard to do.
And making a fuss could mean just telling the truth.
Yeah, exactly. Uncomfortable truth. Exactly. Yeah. And then, you know, a truth that,
not making a fuss because you're having a hissy fit. It's, you're considered making a fuss because you're telling the truth.
Right. Yeah, standing up for yourself. And it's like, I shouldn't even use the phrase making a fuss, but that's just because I think, you know, from girlhood, like that's what we're taught.
That's how we're conditioned.
Yeah. And it's like, it's so ingrained.
Yeah, it's true. All right, Amelia, if you'll stick around, we have a couple more things to talk to you about. But first, we have a few quick reminders for everybody listening and watching.
So for all of you out there, we encourage you to rush out and buy your copies of the Sirens. The perfect place to do that
this cover is to die for.
So good. Yeah. It's in the Friends and Fiction shop on bookshop.org. You'll not only be getting it at a discount, but all your purchases there support our show, our guests, and independent bookstores nationwide.
And don't forget to visit friendsandfiction.com for details on our show schedule, in-person events, book club with Brenda and Lisa, merch store, blah, 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 all the things.
Including our Substack newsletter. You can read all of our free weekly posts on the Substack website or app, or subscribe for free to get them directly to your inbox. And if you upgrade to our paid Substack for just $5 a month, you'll have access to deeper dives with all our weekly show guests like Amelia, plus monthly roundtable discussions like this super fun one MKA just did about rom-coms, plus bonus Q&As with additional authors like the recent ones we ran with Renee Rosen, Lisa Unger, and Chris Bajalian. If you enjoy tuning in for our weekly author interviews, this is a big way you can support us for about $1 a week. So check us out at friendsandfiction.substack.com.
All right, Amelia, before we let you go, and I know you're heading over to the United States for a book tour, I need to know if there's anything new you're working on right now.
Yes, so I'm writing my third book. I've already started again once.
Good. There you go.
But yes, it is historical fiction with a magical / speculative element. And awesome. Again, I'm exploring like mother-daughter relationships between sisters. So there will be strong female characters, and it's going to be set during the Second World War.
Awesome. We cannot wait.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have a lot of very avid book event attendees out there. So if you can remember, can you tell us where you're going to be on the road? And then can you tell us how to connect with you online? And so then if you can't remember, they can just go look at your tour schedule.
Yes. So I do have on my Instagram, there is a link there that links to like the tour page. But I can remember the cities that I'm going to.
Okay, that's impressive.
You don't have to remember the order, just the cities are good.
I'm going to be in New York, and then I'm going to be in Boston, and I'm doing a few events like near Chicago as well. And I'm also going to Kansas City and St. Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm so excited. I mean, I went to the US for the first time last year, loved it. So excited to be coming back.
Well, when Friends and Fiction people show up, they will tell you, and you will get to know. So, Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today with such a busy schedule. It was such a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you for coming on the Friends and Fiction show.
Thank you for having me.
So everyone be sure to tune in next week when Kristin and Mary Kay will welcome our friend, the hilarious, witty Nita Prose, to discuss her new novel, The Maid's Secret. I think, Kristy, tell me I'm right. This is the 4th in her Maid series.
Yes.
Because she did 2 and then a Christmas one, and this one is The Maid's Secret. It is, she's so funny and witty, and the books are so much fun. So that show will air live on the Facebook page on Wednesday, April 2nd at 7 p.m. And then it will be on our podcast on Friday, April 4th.
Thanks to all of you for being with us, and we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in. You can join us every week on Facebook or YouTube, where our live show airs on Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Instagram. We're so glad you're here.